still play?
No, I played clarinet for a few years only.
Right.
What happens was that in Cuba, when I was about 14 years old, I saw a cartoon. We didn't know, this is the 50s. We didn't know jazz from anything.
Right.
Um, I saw a cartoon as a kid where a ship came around and big crates of wood, made out of wood, during a storm, fell in the water, landed on the shore, crashed, and there were a lot of instruments. The natives came in and started playing boogie,
Mm-hmm.
the rolling hand and improvising on a blues scale. I was, I mean, in love with the music. I started following that. Then Glenn Miller. Then found out Glenn Miller wasn't jazz; it was just popular music.
Right.
Then Benny Goodman. Then found out that Benny Goodman later would get in the evening. We get together with small groups, Gene Krupa and so on. And then I started learning jazz and Dizzy Gillespie, who I met and spent time with. That was to die for. He was wonderful.
How old are you back when all this started?
With 14,
Okay.
15, like that.
And you met Dizzy at that age?
No, I met Dizzy much later in life.
Okay.
I met him in an airplane and got to know him, and he gave me his number, and we got to talk. And
Oh, that's pretty cool.
oh man, I mean, if
Yeah.
you're a jazz fan, Diz, I mean,
Yeah, no, I am. I mean, I before this, I mean, I was always a fish artist ever since I was a little kid. But, I did work in the music industry for about 17 years. So going to art school in Ringling in Sarasota in kind of the early 90s was really when I started paying attention to jazz a little bit, because I always, when painting, I always really wanted something that didn't have words. And it was just something that you can just express, because to me, and jazz is also more of a long format. When you're painting and you get into a song, sometimes it only lasts about 3 minutes long, and you want to just play that song over again to capture that mood. Jazz did the job to keep going and to really this. So I got into jazz at a young age, and when I started working in the music business, that's really when I started getting an education on who's who and what's what.
Yeah.
And it was actually one story I want to share with you real quick. It was about the late 90s, and I had a girlfriend at the time that was in New York, and I had arranged an internship for her to work at a record label over the summer. So I went up to visit her. And in New York in the summer, this is pre 9/11, it was just really a wonderful place. It really was. It's much different now, but in New York in the late 90s, pre 9/11, was actually a beautiful, beautiful place. And at any given day, you could do whatever. You just had to look up and see. So the internet was just kind of a new thing. So we looked up on the internet. I think it was like a Tuesday. And we saw that Dave Brubeck was playing in Central Park in something that they were doing called Virgin Summer Stage, where Virgin Records was putting that on. And it was just the most beautiful setting. And I was like, wow, Dave Brubeck, this is an opportunity, you know what I mean? And he was at the time, he was very old then. God rest his soul now.
Yeah.
And so sure enough, we get there and it's a free concert in the park, and everyone's just kind of leaning on trees, and there was a stage up there, and Dave Brubeck came up just as the sun was setting.
Yeah.
It was just one of the most beautiful things I've ever seen in my entire life. Ever since I saw that, I was hooked on jazz. Yeah. So
I talked to him a few times. He played with Paul Desmond, who played Take Five.
Yeah.
And anyway, from there I started learning about Duke Ellington. I met some of the musicians for Duke Ellington and so on and so forth. And then later the Cuban jazz with Paquito de Rivera and Arturo Sandoval and so on. But I was always attracted to the clarinet, and I'm not sure why. Just blowing through wood.
Right.
Playing the blues with a clarinet. I mean...
Well, I mean, to me it makes sense, knowing the type of fisherman you are, and and the type of person that you are. It seemingly that instrument makes a woodwind instrument makes a lot of sense.
Yes,
to me for you.
Yes,
Yeah,
I guess so.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, and you're not really actively playing. today? Or
No, you know what happened? Eventually, I didn't have the discipline to play every day.
hmm
And the clarinet is tough. The embouchure is, I found it tough. And I started learning when I was old already.
Okay.
So it really required that I played all the time. And, fly fishing way took over that,
Yeah, I would imagine so.
and that was it.
Sounds like you're a frustrated musician, just like myself with the guitar.
Yeah,
Yeah.
sometimes I think of something and I like to compose it, and I don't have the voice, I can't sing, and I can't play the clarinet, so it
hmm
stays in my head.
That's
But
outstanding.
like my love for black and white photography, it got to the point that I really had to pour myself to do something, and fly fishing again said, hey,
Yeah, I mean,
uh,
well, that's it. I think you get to a certain point in your life where you question everything that you've done and say, well, what really do I want to do? And because if it's really worth doing, you take me as a person that believes the same way I believe is you really just have to immerse yourself in that one thing.
I
You know,
have to.
even with
Have to.
art, with painting and fish,
Yeah.
I mean, really, it came to a point in my life, and even my wife was like, you love painting fish so much, and I was working in the music business, and I love music too. So it was a very tough decision for me to make. She's like, you got to pick one because you're like a jack of all trades right now, and she was right.
And that doesn't work. Eventually, I don't think so. Eventually, you got to choose certain things,
Yeah.
and so music became something that I hear and so on. I like to call myself an amateur jazz historian.
hmm
I know more about Benny Goodman than his family does,
Yeah.
um, and about many obscure musicians and so on and so forth. Um, but I stopped playing.
Do you ever get into like the Coltrane, Miles Davis, Thelonious Monk
Oh
kind of stuff?
yes,
Because that's
yes,
really my wheelhouse when it comes into
yes.
the
I
jazz.
like
That's stuff I
Coltrane.
can't get enough
I'm
of.
more of a Miles than I am a Coltrane.
Okay.
But I liked Coltrane.
Yeah.
Um, Absolutely, absolutely. And some of the Bill Evans,
hmm
and more obscure Red Garland, who was a bebop player, and so on. Yeah,
Yeah, that's great stuff. I can only imagine like in that scene in the '60s in New York with the jazz musicians. I mean, that was really
yeah,
the heyday. Even the
yeah,
late '50s as well. But you start getting into the mid '60s right there with the jazz era. New York City it must have been
yeah.
absolutely phenomenal.
Yes, and in Miami, many of those musicians used to come and play,
hmm
and we'd go over and listen to them, and it was wonderful,
Yeah,
wonderful.
that's
Uh,
fantastic. Let
but
me let me officially kind of kick off our show here.
okay,
So this is the Connected by Water podcast, fueled by our very good friends at Papa's PLR Rum, who remind us never to be a spectator. If you haven't had a chance to drink their rum, you're truly missing out. So this is an award-winning brand, and it's not just an amazing rum, but also an amazing rye whiskey, and it's just hands down the best family and brotherhood to be a part of. So, Chico, let's cheers to that, please. It's an honor here. So we are a
my
Waypoint hosted
pleasure.
podcast, and you can find us there or also watch, listen, and don't forget to subscribe on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts, and smash those like buttons and subscribe buttons, please. Before we introduce today's guest, we'd like to announce this week's Starbright Solutions Project C-Chief do-gooder. So it is Jessica Boas from Merritt Island, and this lovely Starbright Solutions team do-gooder representative. She kept Bird Island clean on the 4th of July, one plastic American flag at a time, which apparently they were finding them all over the island. So you are this week's Project Sea Safe do-gooder from Starbright Solutions. So congratulations, Jessica. So, and remember, if you want to nominate a do-gooder in your area, just message us on Instagram, and they could win a very special Starbright Solutions prize pack worth over $200. And as always, thank you very much to our great sponsors, Papa's PLR Rum, Starbright, and Olakai for their great support of our show. Today's guest, without further ado, is I said when before we came in this like handful of guys that I have been nervous to have on the show, and you're definitely one of them. I guess now I'm not nervous anymore. I mean, because you make me feel right at home. So, legendary angler, writer, book author, and 2016 IGFA Hall of Fame honoree, Chico Fernandez. Thank you very much for joining me, Chico.
Pleasure to be here.
Yeah, it really is a special moment for all of us here. And allow me, if you will, to be the artist. I always like to try to paint a picture if I can. This is we traditionally do the podcast in our studio. We tried a couple of attempts, but weather didn't permit us to allow that to happen. But I think we ultimately came up with the best solution possible. So, for those of you that are just listening and not viewing us on our YouTube component, we are in the lovely home of the Harkavy family, which they have been so gracious enough to invite us here to hang out and do this episode. And I want to paint a picture that everybody that's in this room right now, and I'm looking at all you guys, means a lot to not only me but to you as well. And
Absolutely.
there is a good
Very much so.
energy in this room, and it's filled with a variety of amazing souls. And I say that to a point of I believe everybody in this room shares a certain deeply rooted spirituality, if you will. And not necessarily a spirituality in one you might think, whether it's a belief in God, a belief in the land or the water being what grounds you or what you're connected to. I think everybody in here feels deeply, and they feel that there is purpose in life and from all directions. And that's everybody in this room. And that's what I feel here in this room. And it is a beautiful, beautiful moment filled with beautiful, beautiful people. And I want to thank you guys very much for having us here and just, quite frankly, being a part of all of our lives. It is really very meaningful. Thank you for bringing Chico to me. And it's a wonderful thing. And, whether it's, Elmer tells me you're really into Tai Chi. And how that might be
for many years.
something that helps you really feel grounded. The use of your canoe, which we'd love to get into, helps you feel maybe more connected. So I think ultimately that's what it comes down to and I want the listeners and the viewers to really feel that from this episode, and to get what I want them to get out of this episode is by the time it's over, that they'll feel like their journey in fishing or being part of the water helps them understand their purpose and their meaning a little bit more deeply into how it feels to truly understand what it means to live a life that's connected by water. So that's my goal here today. So,
Okay.
Tell me about the Tai Chi. I mean, how did you get into that? How long ago?
It's probably been 15, 16, 17 years or so.
Okay.
Um, I passed by a park that had about a dozen people doing that, and it fascinated me. I wanted to find out what it was. When I found out not only what it was, but that it was wonderful to you. I tend to over research things,
Mm-hmm.
but I researched it to death. And one of the things I remember is that I believe it was Mayo Clinic. It was very flattering to Tai Chi, but at the end it said, if you're over 60, maybe you should be doing Tai Chi.
Mm-hmm.
Cleveland Clinic supports it, and Harvard Medical School has spent millions on it. And when I found out that it relaxes you, it gives you tremendous balance, it reduces stress, it reduces anxiety. It was just a win-win, and it went well with my thinking of fly fishing. There's sort of a tie to that way of thinking.
Mm-hmm.
So I started doing it. It took a lot to find someone that would really teach real Tai Chi. Tai Chi has 5 different types that have evolved through the year. The first one, which is Chen, Then Yang style, which is the one I use, is a more popular. Then there's a Sun style and a Wu style and one more. I can't remember the name, but they're the real thing.
Hmm.
The Chen is more. It's the first one and it's more aggressive and so on. Yang style is the best one for health reasons, and that's what I wanted. So I started with the most famous, most used um, um, set, which is called the Yang 24. 24 different moves.
Wow, wow.
If you go to China and there's 100 people in the park,
Is that like a
all,
kata?
all doing the same thing, the chances are it's Yang 24.
Okay.
So I did that, and then one more advanced is called Yang 37. A lot of the same moves, but it's 37 moves, and I use that one too. Actually, I use that one more. I use the 24 as a warm up, and then I do the Yang 37 about 3 or 4 times. And I've been doing it for a long time. I have read, typical of me, extensively about it and what it does and so on. And
What is it about the moves that make them so special? Are you using a certain type of your muscle to push in a certain way?
well, you're using really all your muscles. You use your hands in a way the least. There is no such thing as doing this. You move your body more. And I'm going to say 40% of the time you're in one foot moving to put your foot and then make the move. So it's tremendous for balance. Tremendous for balance.
Interesting. I could see how that would be beneficial in
It
fly
is
fishing.
wonderful. Millions and millions of people over the world do it. In the United States, we only have roughly 3 million people doing that. But in the East, very, very strong Tai Chi. As they are very strong, we're getting to a different thing, but in
No, that's okay.
preventive medicine, they're very big about you're feeling good. Okay, what is it you can do to keep that way rather than when you feel bad, I'll give you a pill that will cure whatever. If you need the pill, okay, but preventive one first. They're very big on preventive. And I think it makes all the sense in the world.
Yeah, and you can tell I mean, you're impeccable shape. I mean, and that's
Yeah,
outstanding. That's outstanding.
I'm going to be 85.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's phenomenal. That's phenomenal. I'm sure Tai Chi has a lot, to do
I
with
think
that as
it
well.
has had a lot to.
Yeah, and I'm sure handling the canoe and as well. I mean, it's probably good for you,
I
right?
have a love affair for the canoe that it almost threatens fly fishing a little
Yeah.
bit.
How so?
I like things that are organic, very basic. Okay, and a canoe, the real canoe. Some people said I have a canoe, and they really have a very light skiff, what we call a micro skiff with a 25 or something, or it's got a bow, but it ends on a flat square bow in the back. A canoe is a short bow ending in a short at the end. It's made for displacement.
Let me interrupt you for 1 second. We have a call that we need to take here real quick. Is
Sure.
that okay? It's Connected by Water. Can I help you?
Yeah, I was kind of wondering if I could order some delivery.
Yeah, absolutely. What can I help you with?
I would like a number one.
Yeah.
3 4s.
Well, I have a number one next to me.
Would it be the one and only man that I'll never leave my wife around unguarded? Mr. Chico Fernandez?
That would be the one.
Dude, when you want to talk about smooth, he's the guy. Chico, how are you, my friend?
How are you?
I am good. I'm missing you. I understand that you guys have a nice little crowd down there tonight at Jeff and Jody's house.
Yes, we do, and I am happy and very comfortable.
So I want to introduce for the crowd, just so not everybody who, if you've been living under a rock, this is Mike Meyer from Papa's PLRM. Hello, Uncle Mike.
Uncle
Hello.
Mike.
Hello, Dennis. Is that Jody? I heard Jody, and was that Jeff?
Wow.
No, that was Heather.
The Feather Harkavy?
Yeah, she's here. She's in the house.
In
My
person.
favorite niece?
Yep.
Oh, I love Heather. Hey, you know what, Heather? I am so sorry I haven't given you a random shout out to say I love you this week. So I love you.
I love you back. Thanks, Mike.
I know you do. I know you do. So how's the weather down there? You guys aren't getting rained out or anything? You're able to sit outside?
Almost. Listen, Mike, as you know, this is the third time trying to get this episode going, and the third time we almost got rained out once again. So, but we're here and we're moving.
You know what? That's good.
Yeah.
That's good. I know, Chico, the last 2 times you guys have absolutely had the monsoon June rains going down there in southern Florida.
Yeah, and it happened this time too.
Yeah. Yeah, it happened this time too.
Today,
yeah,
too?
He, and he braved it. He got through it and he made it. Yeah.
Yeah, tremendous.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Good. Well, be careful going home. If you need to use one of Arkavy's paddle boards, I'm sure he can spare one.
he's got a plethora of them.
I'll keep that in mind.
He does have a plethora. So what's the conversation been about so far?
Well, we're just getting started. We talked a little bit about jazz, and we're talking about Chico's canoe.
Nice.
Yeah.
He is a jazz aficionado, by the way.
Absolutely.
So, that's and that's another reason. Don't let him around the women. Hide the women folk when he's around. I remember it was at Flip's. I don't know, maybe it was his 70th birthday, and we were up around a fire, and I'm looking for my wife, and Chris Peterson is pouring strong drinks for everyone. And I look over there in the glow of the fire. I see my wife sitting next to Chico. Dude, I almost pulled a hamstring running over there to sort of put a little separation in between them. He's the man. And you know what? From what I understand, he can throw, a pretty tight loop, too. Is there any truth to that, Chico?
I have my moments.
You've had a lot of them, man, and it's been one of my life's great pleasures to count you as a friend. We've had some good times, and you know what? I just the accolades that you have are incomparable in this industry, but I think measured by your fishing accolades, they can only be compared to the friendships that you've made and the mentorships you've given. And I'm just so proud to be on that list, my friend. I mean,
thank you. That means a lot to me, Mike. Thank you very much.
It's amazing. I mean, you know what? I think we haven't known each other that long, probably only 25, 30 years, somewhere in that area. But, you've always been a gentleman first, and all the other, adjectives second. And I always want to thank you for the kindness you showed me when I first got into the industry at IGFA. You took time, you spent it with me, you told me what you wanted, that fishing club that we all love so much to be part of, the IGFA to be. And you're instrumental in building BPT, and you just continue to step forward and be an iconic in the world of conservation and fishing. And quite frankly, dude, you leave a big path. You leave a big path behind you. And you know what? The only other person I can think of that can, walk in that path is also the host of your party tonight, Jeff Harkavy.
Yes, indeed.
He is one of the most selfless, nicest men, if not the most selfless and nicest man I've ever met in my life. I had the great fortune of going fishing with him a couple of weeks ago, and my thumbs still hurt, Jeff, from all the snook that we ended up thumbing. And I think in 2 days of fishing with Captain Mike Holliday, we were able to catch over 100 snook. And it was incredible. It was just absolutely incredible. And all the fishing and all that was all good, but anytime you get to spend time around a Jeff Harkavy or Dennis Friel or Chico Fernandez, man, you're so much better off for it. And, I don't want to take up a bunch of time on the podcast, but I want to call up and say, Denny, my brother, Chico, I love you. Feather Harkavy, love you. Here's my random shout out this week. Love you. Jeff and Jody, I don't know if they're listening or they're running around, but thank you guys for this podcast, and thanks for sharing this type of stuff with everybody, Denny.
Yeah.
It really,
Thanks, Mike.
It really means a lot. And this is the stuff that people will remember. And this is the stuff that you're going to be able to look back on when you're my age, and you're going to be able to say, God damn it, was that a good freaking afternoon? See, I didn't say fuck. I said freaking. So that's a good
There he goes.
That's a good. No,
I'm
that's
glad
a good
to clarify
I'm trying
that.
to keep it above board out of respect. Oh, fuck it. I love you guys. Are you guys drinking any Papa's Pilar tonight?
We are. Of course we are.
We are.
Well, you know what? I have one with an arm's length. And if you guys would like to, I'll do one quick toast.
There we go. Our
With
glasses are raised.
I got it.
Okay, hold on. When I said I have one at arm's length, it actually means at arm's length. And I have those short little Irish arms, so I actually have to reach for it. But here's to these worlds colliding. Friel, Harkavy, it's you guys are the best of us all. And Chico, man, you're one of my heroes. You and Mark Sosin are my two heroes. And I know, love Mark.
I love him too.
I would have liked Bill Curtis and put him up there, but he was so freaking angry at the end. I mean, he just pissed me off.
He's the first fisherman I met when I came to this country in 1959.
Well,
a week after I arrived, we were talking snook fishing. So Bill was a friend for a lifetime.
He was
lifetime.
The absolute best. And I remember I was supposed to pick up some crabs for him one day and wait for him and hold Curtis Point for him. I was fishing with a young guy named Larry Sidner, and there was a bunch of tarpon came by, and I flipped out one of his precious crabs and hooked up on a tarpon. And he pulled up and we were fighting it. And Larry goes, break it off, break it off, break it off. And I broke it off and came over
smart.
And gave him his crabs. He looked at me and he said, I'm not taking a nap in your office this week. I was working at IGFA at that point. So that was my punishment, him not taking a nap in my office. So
that sounds outstanding.
Anyway, here's looking at you guys. Love you all very much. You guys have great conversations. Have a great time this evening. Wish I was there. And am in spirit. Salute. Chico, to you, my friend.
Thanks, Mike.
Thank you. Thank you
we'll
so
talk
much,
to you soon.
Mike.
Cheers. Yeah, Mike wanted to say hi to you, so
very nice.
He insisted on that. So we got to get that Oscar music going at some point when Mike calls in. So so we're talking about the canoe. So don't let me interrupt you.
Yeah, I like things that are organic, that are basic.
Yes.
And the canoe, as I was saying, double-ended. It's a design that goes back thousands and thousands of years. It's the most basic design. It's as far as we go in history of something floating for you to get in.
Mm-hmm.
Period. So I have that canoe I showed you on the phone.
Where did you custom make that? Or?
No, that canoe?
Yeah.
No, that's a Merrimack canoe, the company that makes very few. Yeah, and that canoe that you saw there is already 30 years old. It's
really
all over. It's not a prop. I fished that thing.
Okay.
And you're pushing it with a stick, and that's it. There's no electronics. There's no motor. There's nothing. And there's a certain silence when you get in mangrove tunnel, and then you come out to a lake, and you're just pushing that. The canoe hardly makes a noise, parting and joining the water back. It's magical. Most of my trip, I don't fish. I pull my son or my friend. I like
Yeah.
it more than being up front.
Do you really?
Yeah, and I'm looking at that beautiful canoe and maneuvering and getting around a corner and so on. Yes, I love it. Love it.
I mean,
Love it.
I would imagine that there's a lot of satisfaction into guiding someone around on that and having them connect with the
Yeah,
fish.
it's
And,
usually a friend or my son,
Yeah.
which is, my favorite fishing pal.
yeah.
Yes, yes.
Our good friend Elmer says that you told him a story about how you were the first Cuban fly fisherman ever.
Yes, I was the first. There was no fly fishing at all. What happened is that we were kind of poor, and somewhere around the down the line, my father made connections, political connection, later with Batista, and got in real estate, and we made a lot of money.
Okay.
He made a lot of money. I didn't make anything. And soon we had chauffeurs and butlers and limousines, and I was racing a Mercedes 190 SL and da. I was already a spin fisherman.
Okay.
So I knew about casting a jig and hooking a snook and
And this is at
bouncing.
what age?
By the time I was using a spinning rod since 12, 13,
Okay.
but this happened around 16, 17 years old. I already spin fish, and my dad bought a yacht, and he brought a captain from Miami.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know why I didn't get a Cuban captain, but he wanted this guy. And he spoke Spanish some. So I took him to the mouth of the Jibacoa River, showed him how cool I was. I was going to catch a snook, and he could bring his rod and everything.
Mm-hmm.
He shows up with an Orvis Batten killed 9.5-foot bamboo rod, of which I have
Okay.
the rod.
You still have that same
I
rod?
still have the rod.
Oh, wow.
And he started fly casting. I saw the line in the air. I'm a romantic anyway.
Mhm.
I was in love.
So Mike tells us.
And unrolling and landing softly, and so I started fly fishing. It was hard to get equipment. Some came from the United States. There was no one fly fishing, to the point that people thought of it as dangerous. You're whipping this line, it goes back 40 feet.
Right.
Oh God, you got to hook them behind. Are you kidding me? Blah blah blah. I understand. I mean, that was a strange thing to be doing.
Mm-hmm.
So I was the first person doing. There was no one doing that, and I started fishing. I had my Mercedes, so I could run around. So I started fishing all over the island. There was no one, no one fishing. Eventually, before I left, one of my dear friends, I taught him casting. But when Castro came in 1950, January the 6th, 1959, Batista left December 31st in the evening
Mm-hmm.
of 1958. There was no one in the island taking over the command. Castro, who had been in the hills, sort of fighting and hiding, everybody left. He walked all the way to Havana and took over. It took him 6 days. That's why I'm saying January the 6th.
Yeah.
He took over, and we left. My father left on an airplane. I left on the 190 SL Mercedes on a ferry that went over. I'm the only Cuban that came here on a Mercedes.
So you,
And in Key West, and then I
so
rode
you drove the Mercedes onto a ferry and you took a ferry to Miami
Miami with my mother,
in 1959?
1959.
Wow.
And my mother got older. My mother had big.
You came in style.
Oh,
I mean,
absolutely.
yeah. That's great.
My mother had her baguette emeralds and her Bacheron Constantine watches, and my father's Patek Philippe watch and all that jazz.
Now, you remember a lot from that moment.
Yeah,
Those days.
I do.
Yeah?
I do.
And you're how old at this point when you left?
By then, I was 19.
19 years old. So, yeah, you probably do remember
Yeah,
a lot of it. I
yeah.
mean, how bad was everything. I mean, it had to have been horrible there, right?
Well, scary. Nothing had happened yet.
Yeah.
It's not that way now, but nothing had happened yet. We didn't know what it was going to be, but my dad did, because my dad had met Castro in college,
Okay.
and they didn't get along
They didn't. Yeah.
at all. So he feared that when he came into power, he
Right.
put him on the firing squad, as many people were.
Well, history would say he probably would have.
Oh, yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
So I drove from Key West to Miami. My dad was waiting there, and a week later in a fishing store, I met Bill Curtis.
Okay. So this is the first guy that you met and talk about the fishing, and just like you're telling with Mike with
we talked
snook.
about snook fishing.
Yeah.
And he said, "Why, I know where to find snook right now. Let's go."
Mm-hmm.
He said, "Well, it's in the Tamiami Trail. I don't care where it is. It's an hour and a half from now. It's a long ride. It's going to take a while." So I said, I have a pretty fast car outside. You sure? Yes.
It's a Cuban Mercedes.
Yeah. So we got the rods. We took off. We were doing well over 100. Even through 8th Street, there were not many. I was doing 70 and 80. Right now, you couldn't do 40. But anyway, and we got there within an hour. And sure enough, there were snook popping the shoreline. And we fished for snook a week after I got here.
Do you miss, if you've been back to Cuba?
No.
You haven't. You
No.
won't go back,
No,
probably.
no,
I mean, do you
I'm
miss any of that?
I miss the country very much.
Yeah.
Very, very much.
I mean, I would imagine that you lived there in a time where Cuba was just like the place, right?
Oh, my father knew Hemingway. Okay, they were good friends. He was tough.
Yeah.
Yeah, he wasn't a goody-goody.
Right.
But anyway, he used to say to my father. My father was Jose Manuel Fernandez, but since young they call him Che Fernandez. So Che, in the 30s, you had to be in Paris, he said. But in the late 40s and 50s, you had to be in Havana. Remember that? And now that I know better, if I was that age in the 30s, I'd have been in Paris. I guarantee you. The snook would have to wait. But in the late 40s and 50s, yeah, Havana was everything.
Yeah, and
He knew. He understood.
It's I hear stories and I hear tales, and we rehash it all the time when we're sitting around just like we are, drinking rum, talking about Hemingway, and it's one of my favorite things, and that's really kind of how we came to merge with this. Like, our relationship with Papas Pilar kind of happened before the sponsorship, and we had bottles of Pilar. We were just naturally drinking it on the show anyway, and they found out about it.
Oh,
and
my
Mike called
goodness.
me and says, "Hey, what are you doing drinking my rum on your show?" And I'm like, "Well, it's we love the mystique of Ernest Hemingway, and and right down to Key West and Cuba, and that whole nostalgia of that time and that era. There's just something very romantic about it, like you
That's
allude
why
to.
I identify with this. Pilar was his boat, That's Pilar. And my dad knew many of the people that grew the sugar cane, the right sugar cane for it, and who did rum. So I know this stuff.
Yeah.
I know this stuff. Hemingway said something to me one time. I said, I can't write. I'm never going to be able to write anything. I can't. I was good in math.
Okay.
Math, algebra, I was looking forward to take calculus. Imagine that. So I didn't think of myself as a writer. I couldn't write very well. He said, "You don't need to write well. Okay? You need to have something to say. If you have something to say, the
That's all that
editor
matters.
later would take care of it." Within reason, he was right. He was right.
Yeah, a lot can be said about that. We talk a lot about the similarities between all the arts, whether it be writing, whether it be poetry, whether it be music and painting.
Mhm.
We liken a lot of parallels to fishing all the time.
Absolutely.
Whether it's the thought process behind it all. When you're fishing, I really believe you're creating those moments. Like in those moments, you're creating the action. You're creating the connection with the fish. It is very much a creative endeavor. How you do it matters. The way you do it matters, but it matters on different levels, right? Just like art matters on different levels.
Yeah. That's why I think of fishing at its best when you're doing it all. That is, when you're not depending on electronics and so on to find fish.
Mm-hmm.
Today a big yacht could have $1 million worth of electronic. In the old days, we sat in blue water, climb up as high as we could, or whatever, with the binoculars and look for birds, look for seagulls. Were usually diving. Usually meant they had tuna and bonito and so on, or the man o' war, which somehow usually had dolphin and so on. Now, with the electronics, you can tell where the birds are 30 miles around,
Mm-hmm.
and how many birds and how long it take the boat to get there. Might as well be home playing a computer game of that.
Right.
I like it when I did that. That's why I like poling the canoe. I'm poling a flats boat. Basic.
Where you can
And
feel
fly
connected.
yes, and fly
Yeah.
fishing is very basic. You can buy the cliches. You can buy your way around the world to the best camp and have the best guide, and he takes you fishing, and he finds the fish, and he gets in position so you have a good backhand. But there's a point that he says, "Okay, Chico, Heather, you see it? Yeah, I see it. Okay, go." And that's it. You can't buy that cast.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, Otherwise, Bill Gates and several of those guys would be the best casters, and they're not. I've seen him cast. They're not.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
For the record,
yeah,
Bill
for the-
Gates cannot fish.
Uh, you know.
Doesn't matter how rich you are.
Yeah. A good racket. I used to play tennis. A good tennis racket don't come with a backhand.
Right.
You can buy it. You have to be able to make a top spin backhand.
Yeah.
And I like that part of it. That
I was fishing. I was actually playing golf at Adios with a good friend of mine, Bernard Paulhus, who he owns the Skipjack program, which is a very good and reputable fishing program, offshore program. But we were playing golf, and I have a very old set of Clevelands, and they're probably about 25 years old, and I still use them today. And I always want to get a new set of clubs, but I don't play enough to justify spending the money. Right? So at these clubs, and I hit a bad shot, and I threw the club, and I was like, "Yeah, I want to get a set of those Callaway Rogues." And Bernard just tells me, he goes, "It's not the club that makes the golfer." I'm like, "Yeah, I guess you're right."
No, it really isn't. A few years ago, only 5-6 years ago, I took out one of my old Fenwick glass rods from the 60s.
Mm-hmm.
An 8-foot, 10-inch, 10 weight, which is so soft now I had to cast a 9 weight. And I took it out tarpon fishing, and I got a 100-pound tarpon with it. Yeah, the rod was softer, the loop was a bit bigger, but I made a 60-foot cast to the tarpon. And yes, the rod was softer. I fought him way deep in the bottom. And yeah, probably took longer, a bit longer, not a lot. Took me 35 minutes or so. Maybe a big, strong guy with the latest thing could have landed in 20 minutes. So what? I'm not trying to get it out of the way. I don't want to fight him forever because it's not good for the tarpon. But what it did almost 55 years ago, it didn't. It did then.
Mm-hmm. A fish is a fish, an angler is
Yeah,
an angler.
yeah.
Right?
I have some older 10, 15-year-old rods that I happen to like. One that I like. It casts just as well now as it did before. Exactly. Not true glass. Glass gets softer.
Right.
And that Fenwick rod was softer.
Super
couldn't-
soft, huh?
You have to carry it and carry it. But basic. The canoe that I love so much, that canoe that you saw that I love so much, and it looks, it's 30 years old. Most of the canoes that people have last 100 years. I have a friend with 110-year, an acquaintance, 110-year canoe, and I've pulled it. It's a little fragile, but it works.
Yeah, it works.
My granddaughter will be pulling this. And 30 years, it hadn't changed at all. I put a little bit of neat's-foot oil, a little bit oil on the wood, and that's it. And I want wood on the canoe. It makes the canoe much more quietly.
Our good friend Elmer, who's here in the room, tells me a story, right? And he showed me a little bit of a video, and I want you to talk about this. He recently said that you caught a nice sized snook. I saw the snook, and it wasn't a nice sized snook. And in Elmer's words to me, he says, Dennis, it was one of the most incredible, well done jobs I've ever seen from an angler in my life. And I want you to tell us that story in your own words if you can. You remember the catch I'm talking about?
Oh, yeah, of course. I fished snook all of my life. That was the first fish I caught with a fly rod. And that's my favorite fish.
Mine too.
I used to tell people why it was my favorite fish. I like the environment. I like the mangrove. My favorite tree is a red mangrove. The snook is mysterious to me. It jumps. It can take surface flies and all that. Today, I don't think quite that way. I think it's chemistry. Like meeting a girl and it's
romantic.
You're in love, whether she's pretty or not, or tall or short, it's chemistry. I like a big snook coming down the flat. I get a little nervous. A big permit, I can pretend to be cool a little bit. I can move, not with a snook. So I fought a lot of snook in my life. You have to feel the fish. He takes off and you take off, but you're waiting for him to stop, and you pull back and turn him. It's a very strong feeling between the both of us. That fish was caught on spinning tackle. On fly rod, I caught it exact same fish, 33-inch on a fly rod, only a couple of months apart from that catch. And I did what I do sometimes that people not sure what they think. I put the rod on there and I fight him with a hand. And when he gives, I can pull up straight on and landed the fish on a difficult situation. This was caught in a tunnel.
Right.
In a mangrove tunnel.
Yeah, and I've been in those tunnels with Elmer, and they can get pretty tight in there.
Yeah, but I must give him some credit besides getting us there, finding the fish and so on, which he does so well.
He is incredible, isn't he?
Oh, he the man.
He is the man.
He's the man.
He is the man.
There was a point, I was very handicapped because of sitting down, couldn't get up and run around and get my rod on there. This was all sitting down. So there was a point in the tunnel.
Well, you're in the John boat. Because
in
the tunnel, it's tough to.
Right. So,
you can't bring the skiff in there.
So I can't turn around or anything.
Right.
But I'm fighting the fish, and so the fish gets back, and I can't chase him, which I would have. And there's a stump coming down. He gets there, snook. No, man. He turned around and go through the stump. I would have gotten through there and get my hand on, but I couldn't do that. But we were like two dancers together. He went around, I handed him that, he put it through the hand, he gave it to me, and I was still fighting.
Yeah.
I mean, we were in rhythm, man.
Yeah.
This was good. So I give him credit for part of the fight,
For sure.
You know.
Well, I don't know. I mean, I saw the video. It was a quick little save. It was wonderful, but just turning the snook the way you did and getting that thing not to go deeper than it already was quite impressive.
Well, thank you. Thank you.
For sure. I mean, you are a master, my friend. So, and your reputation precedes itself. So, It's a beautiful thing. I first saw you in person. We didn't meet. Was that 2 years ago? I believe it was the symposium for Bonefish Tarpon and Trust 2 years ago. Yeah, and you were up on the panel of
Oh, yes,
right,
I
the Great
remember
Ones
that.
panel up there, and I was so enamored at hearing you speak, and that's when you said snook's my favorite fish, and you said
Yeah.
that, and I said my favorite fish too, right? So I was really like, well, that's outstanding, and just hearing you speak, and so you've been someone I wanted to speak to on this podcast since that very day, and
Thank you.
it's always been a goal of mine. So it's wonderful that you're here. You get to Miami, right? You're with Bill Curtis, and you're catching snook, and at one point, I'm curious. In 1959, this is going into 1960. What point do you really start pursuing this as your life's mission? I mean, was it already being pursued at that point, or did you make a
Okay.
conscious effort for this, or a decision, I should
No,
say?
I tell you what happened. When you land in a new country, it's not only a different language and so on, uh, which I already spoke English some, but pretty good, I think. But the culture and everything is different. And my dad left all the money over there. I think he brought close to $100,000,
Mm-hmm.
which was more than it is now, but not enough to retire with two kids and a wife.
Mm-hmm.
So he bought a house and all of that, and try to hustle. So I was under the pressure of you got to get a job or get an education, get a job. You can't be studying marine biology. What the heck are you going to do with marine biology? You're not going to make any money. He's right. You get a PhD in marine biology, you won't be driving a Ferrari Berlinetta 12-cylinder.
Right.
I guarantee you. Unless you're parking cars, and for a moment you got that. Uh, so, so what I wanted to do, and the music and everything, it was like, you got to make a living. Uh, so,
I
and
understand
then
completely.
perfecting the English. I'll deviate a moment and tell you that my father said, the first thing you need is learn English better. So his way was, you need to start dating a blonde, freckled girl. For a moment, I said, well, I'm perfectly all right to obey to that.
Yeah.
Uh, what he was saying is, you gotta date. Don't try to date some other Latin girl that can learn somebody that doesn't know Spanish at all,
Mm-hmm.
which I did. I dated a girl from Birmingham, Alabama,
Wow. So you
and,
went all in.
and she had an accent.
You really took that to heart.
Oh yeah, and I remember telling her, "You have an accent." He said, "Chico, you sound like Tarzan with your accent." And the next girl was from the Bronx, and she was tough.
Man, you hit all points,
I
didn't you?
mean, she was tough. But at any rate, the idea was make a living. So you're good with numbers, so I don't think that was logical, but we thought it was. Study accounting, study business. You can always make money with business. So I did that, and I had some connection with Jim McLemore, who basically invented Burger King.
Mm-hmm.
Burger King started in Coral Way. So I got a job in the accounting department and became assistant budget director, and then for a while budget director. So I would tell Burger King how much money I think they were going to make next year and blah blah blah. And I was doing okay. I knew the president. This was good. And then Jim McLemore decided he was going to sell Burger King to Pillsbury, which he did. And I thought, I don't want to do this the rest of my life.
Yeah, you didn't like that little guy that you poked him in the belly.
Yeah,
the
yeah.
Pillsbury
And
Doughboy. That had to go.
retired 30 years later, and someone would give you a darn a gold Rolex or something.
Right.
So I quit without a job or anything. Quit. I went back to my wife, who was a northern Pennsylvania girl from the woods, from the a little town named Towanda. They had 4,200 people, and when I came after she passed away from ALS, I went to spend time with her brothers and all that. Still have 4,200 people, 55 years later. And this was not she was very proper German descent, and she said, "You quit, you have a better idea?" "No." "Oh, what kind of job have you gotten then?" "Don't have a job." "What are you going to do?" "Well, I'm going to find myself." This didn't go over at all. It went over worse with my dad. You're going to find yourself. I remember, I'll find you.
Yeah,
I
know exactly where you are.
Are you kidding me? So I started writing. No magazine accepted me, but there was a little magazine called Pleasure Boating, and they paid $15 a column. I took the job. And from there, I started getting a little money to teach and so on, and got not a job, but got 3M, Scientific Angler, to pay me a little bit to use my fly lines. They gave me lines, and then eventually, and from there on, it got more and more.
Can I ask you a question?
I had to hustle to death for that.
I bet you did. Let me ask you a question, though, because there's a lot of sacrifice involved in that decision, right? And, not only just for yourself, but it's everyone around you, and which is obvious. And but what's driving you? Like, what's motivating you to make this choice?
Perhaps the freedom of doing what I wanted to do. I came to this country, and it was big on you can do anything you want and so on, and I was inspired, and the idea of being in the office got to the point the idea depressed me to death.
Right.
And it took a while before I could make money. Marilyn was a flight attendant for Delta, eventually became an international flight attendant, and it was a few years I made nothing. I mean, I practically invented that. No one made money doing this. And eventually I got to the point that they pay me to use the flyline, they pay me to use the reel. Eventually got a Hughes Bonefisher, and then got a backcountry boat, and I talked them into paying me almost $20,000, I think, a year in those days, to have the boat, use the boat, and get $20,000.
What a satisfying feeling that must have been. Right? I mean,
absolutely.
Come on, I mean, it's working. It's working.
It's
right?
working.
Yeah,
it's working.
I mean, we felt that too when I left the music business to paint fish. Thank God I have a supportive wife who is an artist also. She's also a painter. That really was the one that I was so afraid to do that. How could I sacrifice? But she knew that's what I was destined to do, what I really wanted to do. Yeah. And she was willing to make the sacrifice as well. God bless her. I mean, thank you.
Well, and it's scary.
But it's scary. It's tough.
You don't have health care. You don't have anything.
Right.
On the other hand, there's no one saying, that's too much money. We can only pay you if you figure a way to get, whatever, Meryl Streep to come over here and do something, and you make a lot of money because there's no one saying, that's too much money. You shouldn't make that much money. No.
Right.
There's no one doing that. And I like that a lot.
Yeah.
And still do. Still do.
Right. That's an interesting point you make about that, because I never really thought about it like that, but that is the benefit to being out on your own.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
100%. Yeah. So now you've made a life of this.
Yeah.
Right.
Yes.
And this is like the 60s and 70s, and you're writing and you're pursuing everything, and you're starting to innovate the sport. When is it that you felt that you were really coming into your own as wow, I am a part of this scene, a part of this sport, because when you came here from Cuba and even the early days in the 70s and stuff, fly fishing wasn't really a thing, right? Now, it was a thing, but it wasn't really like a thing like it is now.
No, not even remotely.
In fact, I would venture to say that I heard something a couple of years ago that it wasn't really until the movie A River Runs Through It came out did fly fishing explode the way it did. That was kind of like the beginning of everybody getting exposure to it. I think it was the Fly Fishing Museum recently up in New York did a whole expose on A River Runs Through It. I think it was like 2 or 3 years ago, and that's when I read up on it. And that really, I think they said the amount of anglers that fished in the fishing world, I think it was about 1% of them were fly fishermen, and now ever since that movie, it was something like 20% or something. My numbers are paraphrased and incorrect, but
I only
something to that
partially
effect.
agree with that. It was already growing and moving up.
Okay.
And that came at, it was going like that, and then it
So
did
I
that.
want to hear from your words how that progressed.
But it was already moving. I was starting to get students for fly fishing and everything else. What happened after that was the ladies. I hardly ever had a lady fly fisherman.
Mm-hmm.
If she showed up, it was with her husband because she wanted to please her husband, and I would generally advise him, if this is not something you like, you can't force yourself to get up at 5 in the morning or 6 and spend all day in a boat in the sun. I couldn't shop all day in the mall in the sun all day. I'd die, but I don't die when I fly fishing.
Right.
You gotta want it, and with that, more ladies were fly fishing. Where now sometimes I get 2 ladies come over for class, and occasionally the husband doesn't fly fish and they don't care. But they're coming to fly fish that want to be or become fly fishers, which is wonderful. But it started to grow. It started to move on.
And before that, you were fishing Biscayne Bay, really. You fly fishing Biscayne Bay when no one else really was, right?
Yeah. We used to go to Key Biscayne and get there at dawn and walk the seawall at the sea aquarium. The mullet would gather against the wall, huge jack crevalles, 18, 20, 25, 22 pounds, right on your feet, crashing the mullet, and you walk back and forth, slapping a popper, hook one, and fight it. I caught on fly an 8-pound mangrove snapper, which I have a picture.
It's a nice sized mangrove snapper.
It's huge mangrove snapper. But again, sadly to say, with time and more people, the jacks were smaller and smaller. And it's been 10 years or 15 since I've gone there, but the last time there weren't many and the jacks were 3 pounds, 4 pounds.
Who were you fishing with back in those days?
Norman Duncan, Little John Emery, and Flip when he wasn't in the Peace Corps, because Flip was a few years in the Peace Corps and it was just the 3 of us. But when he was back, he was doing that too. And there were a couple of other friends that Little John was the guy that was with, but there was Big John who came over and fished sometime. I still talk to him. He bought an XKE, a Jaguar SKE coupe, and I remember the car very well. But there was just a very few of us. Fished the Tamiami Trail. Lot of snook, catch 50 snook in one day if things were right. I guarantee you, with rare exception or none, if there was someone fly fishing, when I came in there, I knew who they were.
Right. Man, those must have been legendary days.
For years.
Legendary days.
And there was no one living in Marco Island. It was just sand. And you rode your car all the way up there, went over the hill, lowered the tires down to almost flat so that they widen, and then run the beach looking for snook. And while I never had a pickup truck, that's not my thing, but borrow someone's pickup truck and stand up on the pickup truck and then run the beach, not run, but drive along the beach, and you see the big schools of sardines, of pilchards, gray, all gray. You look at them and you look at them, and eventually the big gray mass in the middle, poof, a white would come out, bright white, and it closed. That was the sand that you could see the bottom because the snook popped bait. And you see those and over there. And sometimes it'd pull up and I said, don't move, and I'd cast from the pickup truck and hook a snook, then get out the pickup truck. And when we didn't, then I rode the Mercedes over and we'd sleep in the car or in the sand on a blanket. Sand is really tough. It's not soft. It was hard. I remember one time we had little John Emery and I went, and I think Norman went, and John was in charge of the lunch. Usually I was in charge of the lunch. I made the best sandwiches, but he was in charge of the lunch. And we were to be there 2 days. There was not much money. What he brought was the meal. So around 11 o'clock, we had caught snook, and John, wanted to eat. Oh, I brought sandwich for you. Oh, my God. He gives me a sandwich. I take a bite. What is this? Peanut butter and jelly. You know what they are. I know what they are. What do they belong together? You got that mix. I never heard of that.
That was your first time eating a peanut butter and jelly sandwich?
So I'm not sure I try to eat the bread. I like peanut butter and jelly now. I put raisins on it and everything. But then I get some water, drink. What is this? Iced tea. Could have brought water or Coke. Why are we having iced tea? I thought that was the most terrible thing at the time, but I had to eat it for 2 days.
Yeah.
And then I got used to it.
You got used to it.
But there was no one in there, and then the Macco brothers built it became Marco Island, all those hotels and everything, but there was nothing. You had to bring your own water, and you had to make sure you have enough gas because there wasn't a gas station there or anywhere near there.
So that kind of segues me into really what I guess brought to mind to bring up. Like, you really saw South Florida in every state. Every state of being, right? And to those beautiful natural coastlines, to trying to make your way on your own, and not everything seems to be nerfed off now. Like, you can't go anywhere without there being some sort of regulation or regulatory or some sort of development, or it's been run over a million times over.
There was hardly anyone over there. Hardly anyone.
Yeah.
There was occasionally I'd drive the Mercedes there, and I don't know much about motorcycles, but there was a motorcycle that was very fast and famous, a Vincent Black Shadow.
Mm-hmm.
And it would do 130, 140 real miles an hour. And in order to do that in motorcycle, you lay flat. Of course, if you take a spill, you die. But And sometimes we'd hear the noise, and Norman said, coming, and you see it go, woof, and he passed by a Vincent Black Shadow. And
Really?
I remember that so well.
It was on Tamiami Trail?
Yeah, Tamiami Trail.
Yeah.
Now, of course, there's so much traffic. Well, that world is long gone. That wouldn't
Yeah,
happen.
it's an age of it's just an age of tale now, right? That's all we can do is tell
It's so
stories
different.
about it.
It's hard
And it'll
to
never
believe.
be that way again. I mean,
No.
So what do you think? Like, how do you feel about what you see nowadays?
Well, in a way, it saddens me, but as you get older, it is what it is, and you have to adapt to it. And I don't want to spend all my time and oh my God, and it used to be so good, and that's the way it was, and this is what it is now, and that's it.
Yeah. I mean, we talk about Bonefish Tarpon Trust and your involvement there, and the mission of Bonefish Tarpon Trust, and the goal and there's some preservation and restoration involved to try to get some of these resources back. It's really important work that they're doing. And a lot of the organizations too. That's why I would be remiss not to mention the IGFA and remiss not to mention the CCA and the great work that all these organizations do. But with your involvement with Bonefish Tarpon and Trust, having someone like you and like Jeff involved in that has that perspective of where we were as Florida, we were as Bahamas and stuff, and what we need to do now to try to preserve and even restore what we can.
We need it desperately. When Tom Davidson called me, he called 7 people at the beginning, and he called me. I remember the phone call. I remember picking up the phone off the wall in my kitchen. I remember so well. And I knew who he was already, and had a lot of respect. He's one of my heroes. To conceive that idea and bring it to what it is today. When he first called, I joined and I was happy. Deep down, I wonder how far we could go with the 7 of us.
Right.
What the heck? But it did. It became, bigger and bigger, and I hope it becomes giant, because we need it. It's not just necessary, it's imperative.
We do.
Oh, more now than ever. But sometimes we're in a group and there'll be 100 people and all of us will be there, Jeff would be there, or whatever, something with, and I see Tom sitting there quietly and I think, he's my hero, he's the man.
Yeah, that's nice.
He started and he sits there now quietly. And
we talk a lot about the Everglades. In Chokoloskee, and it's really nice to get down there with Elmer and really see the land preserved, the water preserved, and it's really just a beautiful, beautiful place. One of the most beautiful places I've ever seen. Yeah. Can you kind of pour your heart out about that? Because I know you're passionate about that area. What about that makes it such a deep connection for you?
The thing is that I love bone fishing. I wrote a book about it, and I love bone fishing. I love the mutton snapper tailing in the rare places where they do, and all of that jazz and permit and everything. And I've done quite a bit of blue water fishing in the past. I've caught quite a few marlin on fly. I caught the 3rd white marlin ever caught in the world on fly, when only Billy Payne caught one. And George Merton caught the 2nd one, which was the judge that made me a citizen. He's the guy that made me a citizen.
Really?
So I've done a lot of blue water, and with my dad, we troll for big marlin and everything. I've realized that I have brackish water running through my veins. That's the red mangroves, the bromelias, the wading birds, the red mangrove especially with the spider-like, and of course the snook and baby tarpon and sea trout and so on. I took 21 trips to Alaska. I was in Tierra del Fuego. I spent a lot of time at one time in New Zealand, and I loved it. But if I had to fish one more time, it'd be in the Everglades. I'd pull my canoe. I wouldn't even fish. I'd pull my canoe and let my son fish.
That's a beautiful thing. I just thought of a painting.
That's how it feels.
That's fantastic. I really, the Everglades is such a connection for me as well. I mean, I grew up out here, out west, so they say, you know what I mean? And I didn't grow up, I didn't with a silver spoon in my mouth or have a boat growing up or anything like that. I didn't have much growing up. I was the youngest of 6 kids.
Good for you.
And so I grew up bass fishing, and I grew up fishing out here, quite frankly. And out in the Everglades, heading out the Alligator Alley and I-27 with my brother. When my brother first started the drive when he was 16, we'd head out there with our bass rods and just fish all day, getting whatever, find whatever we could. So it's always had a deep connection, to me as well, and everything that you said. just with the brackish water running through your veins, and just the life that's out there. And it's really become our mission on the show as Connected by Water, as an art studio or whatever you want to call what we are. We don't even know what we are some days. You at least getting the word out about the Everglades and try to preserve and save and conserve as much as we can of it.
Yes.
That's really our mission right
I love
now.
that world.
Yeah, and the reefs and,
Yeah.
and everything like that. But really, for me, the deeper connection
Yeah.
and the work is being done in the Everglades for us, on our end at least.
Yeah. And there's no doubt, we all know, it's all connected. It isn't like I love the Everglades, the rest. No, it's connected, as you said, to the reef, to the bonefish flats, and to the reef and to the ocean. It's all connected. And further you go further up in the Everglades, when I canoe the other way, I catch bass, maybe mixed with a little snook and a baby tarpon, but I'm getting bass and bluegills and all of that.
Yeah.
So the Everglades is many things, and it's all connected. But that part of the brackish water, it's just magical for me. It's chemistry, like the girl you love.
If you could speak to, and I don't want to call it a generation, but the next phase of this, right? Because it's more than just one generation. You know the phases I'm talking about. Right?
Mm-hmm.
The next phase of this. If you could speak to them and tell them anything, a word to the wise, if you will, what would that be?
For starters, I don't think you can become an angler today, let alone a fly fisherman, and not support several of the organizations, not just one. After all, joining BTT, IGFA, whatever, only costs $50, or it costs less than the price of a fly line, for crying out loud.
Mm-hmm.
Join and give money and participate and help, because we need the help.
Yeah.
Second, because technology has made things so easy. When we started, we didn't have a boat. When we finally got a boat, Norman bought a skiing boat, cut half of it from the top and threw it out, put a cap on it, and polling platform hadn't been invented. Flip and I used to stand on the engine and pole, which sounds like an impossibility right now. Certainly for me it would be. Okay, in the 70s, all of a sudden you can buy a boat with a polling platform and a push pull and all of that. So things have become more and more easy, spoon-fed. And the only thing that bothers me is that because they didn't have to work that hard to get to it, they didn't develop a love for the environment.
Mm-hmm.
I see people, when I fish out of Miami, we had a habit of going on Sunday when no one goes because there are too many people. But we go there at 3 o'clock in the afternoon or 4, and by 5:30 there's no one there. And we do good. The bonefish are happier and everything work well. But you can't believe the amount of junk. Balloons saying happy birthday, floating this, Pat's Blue Ribbon, beer. How can you take your family out and throw stuff out? Not only is that bad, you got 2 kids that are learning that way. Okay, so coming in so quickly, I find that these people don't have a love and a respect for the environment. We need more of that.
I agree.
We need more of that.
I agree wholeheartedly.
And we
that's
need
the
it
simple
desperately.
thing. That's the simple thing that people can do. Like we always say, you don't have to move mountains. You don't have to start an organization. You just have to clean up after yourself.
You got your wife and your 2 kids and you're fishing mangrove snapper with little shrimp, and that's wonderful. I do it with my granddaughter. I love it. Okay. And you have your 23-foot boat or whatever. Have a little garbage place that you put all your junk. It's not too hard. When you come to the dock and Black Point, for example, there's oodles of bins for you to throw the garbage. You just move 50 feet 100 feet and you dump the thing, for crying out loud.
Mm-hmm.
They don't have the love that we were forced to have, because we were forced to learn. There were no books to read or anything. I wish they would do that. I wish they would learn and have respect for the environment and realize you can't be throwing garbage out. And in the meantime, yes, support IGFA and BTT and Captains for Clean Water. It costs almost nothing.
Yeah. I think people definitely need to change their perspective. We talk about a lot of times all the different problems, the lake stuff, the discharges, the chemicals, all the stuff like that. But really, the big problem to me is there was a lot of people in the state that wasn't designed to have a lot of people in it. And there's a lot of sprawl, there's a lot of concrete surfaces, and there's a lot of build and everything. Not that I'm against progress. But there are a lot of people, but there's a certain responsibility that comes with that. If that's going to be the case, then please take care of it.
Yeah. Also, I find that all of us live in a world that we all know about this. You're all agreeing. Okay, that's great. I live in 3 worlds.
Mm-hmm.
I live in the fishing world, but I got my friends in the jazz world. They don't know tight loop from anything, okay? Mm-hmm. Some of these guys have PhDs and everything else. That's nice. And I live in the Cuban world. And we go out and we dance at a party and da-da-da. We talk about the old Cuban things and the Cuban slangs. And okay, that's great. And some of those guys, one of them was one of the best architects in Miami. So they're not idiots. You ask them about the Everglades, you know what most of them think of it? Oh, that's a swamp full of mosquitoes.
Mm-hmm.
That really pissed me off.
Right.
They're not idiots. This is what they know. I don't know how you can understand millions of mosquitoes and the swamp and the mud. There isn't that many mosquitoes, and when you leave the dock, it's even none of. There is no swamp. There are beautiful trees, and what are you talking about? They don't know. They don't know, and they live in Miami. And you know what? They vote.
Right.
And they're the majority. So sometimes when I write an article, and all you guys say, "Oh, that was a wonderful article," yes. But I'm thinking, I think the English cliches, I'm preaching to the choir. I know you agree and I agree and I love you for it. I want to write that for the Wall Street Journal. I want to write that for some other magazine. Garden and Gun, where they just wrote an article about me. We need the other people to know.
We do. And that's also another mission of what we're trying to do here, is kind of cross that barrier, cross that line, and speak to more than just fishermen, and more than just divers and more than just surfers. We want to get out because this is something that affects everybody, and it's going to affect everybody, or at least let me rephrase that. We hope it doesn't affect everybody before it's too late, and then they realize, wow, there was something we could have done. We're trying to do the work here,
Absolutely. The Everglades it used to start just south of Orlando.
Mm-hmm.
Orlando.
And Shingle Creek.
And now it's 6% of the Everglades or whatever is left.
Mm-hmm.
So I would give it, when I teach fly fishing and when I have people come over for casting lesson, they always get a big dose of that. No one disagrees. I don't think I let them.
So, with all that talk, what still seems to amaze you in a good way these days? Like, what is the one thing that you still keep just gives you wonder every time you think about it?
Good old-fashioned nature. When I pull the canoe or run my Hell's Bay, and see that the Everglades is still the same as it was hundreds of years ago. Less fish because we're fishing them, but that still enchants me.
Mm-hmm. There's a 42-pound, 5-ounce redfish.
Yes.
That still has your name on it, right?
It's still a world record, yeah.
Can you tell me that story?
Oh my God. The Department of Travel and Tourism in North Carolina decided that they wanted to have a world record on fly rod, and they called me and asked me if I wanted to try to do that, and I said yes. And they said we're going to get a guide that will take you, and he's an expert. He can find 30, 40, 50, 60-pound redfish, which he could find.
Mm-hmm.
And uh, I rode over. I flew over there. Joel Arrington was in charge. We were friends. He was very good photographer. Blah blah blah. Okay, so I get over there. The next morning we go to the dock. Vernon Arrington was the name of the guide.
Okay.
We get over there. The guy looked at me. He said, tells Joel, got a foreigner. No, that's Chico Fernandez. Okay, and what is it we're going to do? Well, he's a famous fly fisherman. Said, I got a reputation in the marina here. I'm not taking some Cuban guy with a sissy fly rod. No, I'm not taking him. My God, he came from Miami, blah, blah, blah. We talked for a bit. No. Joel is saying, you want to do this, So finally, listen to this. The guide looks at me and said, follow me. Takes off. I'm walking behind her. I look at Joel. Walk. A long walk down the dock. We get to a restaurant. We goes in the restaurant. We go in. He's obviously well known there. 2 Vernon omelets, one for me and one for this guy here. I don't know what the other guy wants. We sat down. Joel chose something. I got a 5-egg omelet that was this big. But this is years ago. I could eat that without thinking. Even today, I could probably eat half of it. I'm pretty good at that. So I ate the whole omelet. So he looked around. He said, okay, let's go. Must have been a test. So we're going. The only guy that has a flats boat, I've been told. This is cool. We get there. It's a 23-foot boat with 2 Pentax, Volvo Pentax, inboard, outboard. A push pole is not in his vocabulary.
You're kidding me.
I said, are we getting someplace to get to the flat boat? Boy, this is the flats boat. Oh, jeez. Okay. I get in with my rod. We run over to an area. He puts around. Finally, 200 feet away, he said, there they are, 200 feet. Can you see them? I look. Yeah, I can see them. It's a school of 40 fish, bright red in 4 feet of water. Yeah, I can see them real well. I'll get you to them. Good. I strip a line out, floating line. I brought another reel with a sinking line. He gets within 200 feet, and he said, okay, can you see him? Yeah. Sick him. He's 200 feet away. He said, boy, I thought you were good.
Really?
Yeah, but we can't cast our fly. This is a fly rod, blah, blah, blah. Oh, Jesus. Let's see what you can do. I didn't know well enough then, as I would know now. I didn't need a sailfish fly. I figured the redfish are big. I never cast to a redfish. The world record was 16 pounds then. I brought a sailfish.
16?
16.
Wow.
Bart Forth.
You crushed that one.
Yeah, I crushed. So I false cast and double hole and, and I think I made an 80-foot cast maybe, The fly's this big, 2 chickens gave their life to make this fly. It's a big fly. So the guy said, that it? Oh, geez, we're going to have problems. And I didn't know what wind is blowing. I finally got a cast. He got me close enough. I made a cast, but the fish, it was 4 feet of water where they were riding that thing and really moving. The fly stayed on top. They didn't pay attention. So I had brought scissors. Those days there was a material called fish hair, which I
The
did.
book, yeah.
So I took and fortunately made the fly from an 8-inch to a 6.5-inch, still a big fly, and I changed reels to a sinking line, side casting, but now stripping the fly would be a foot under or something.
Mm-hmm.
I was going to use a Finor number 3 wedding cake, but I switched to the sinking line, which had a Seamaster double handle, which is what I caught the fish. This time he got me close enough. I made a cast, strip, 3 or 4 fish parted. This huge fish came behind him. He was 60, easy. He looked at the fly, didn't take it. He got me again close. I let the fly sink a little more. I retrieved 3 fish, came behind. One of the fish took it, was at 42-pound, 5-ounce. I hooked the fish, fought it, and landed it. And when we landed it, I wasn't as happy as I should be because I remember the 60, 65-pound, the other fish. And the guy said, Vernon said, that fish is over 40. It doesn't look that big. Boy, you're thinking about that other fish. Forget that other. And the fish was 42 pounds. And then the next day, I went out with 16-pound tippet. This was 12-pound tippet. With 16-pound tippet, I got a 26-pounder, which was also a world record, but that has been broken.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how I caught the fish. And then 40 years later, at least 40 years later, I was writing the Redfish book. I wrote the story, and I started thinking of Vernon. And I looked around, and I had his number. And I called him. I didn't know what he was going to do. I mean,
Yeah.
and he said, I've thought of you. We had a big adventure those days, that day, and I didn't realize it, but I do now. And we talked for 30 minutes, and he had retired. He lived in the mountains, producing some good liquor, which he offered for me to come and drink it with him. I never got there. I should have, but I never got there. But we had a good talk. It touched my heart that he was so nice to me then, and he understood that was a big adventure we had.
That's good, and good on you for having the patience to deal with him.
Yeah.
Like you did.
I could tell he had a good heart. He just, came from a different world. This guy's fly fishing, I get it. I knew he was good.
Yeah. I don't know. That's a gift, I think, that you could have saw that in him, because I don't think most people would have responded that way.
Thank you.
100%.
Yeah.
So we talk about the one you got. What about the one that got away? This is something I ask all the greatest anglers that come on my show. And I don't even need to explain that question, because everybody knows what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Because we all have it.
Yeah, I have a fish. In the 60s, we meaning John Emery and Norman Duncan and Flip and we caught some big snook, over 20 pounds on fly. And the fish were what we call cruisers. In those days, with the end of the outgoing tide, big snook would come pushing a wake down the middle of the canal. I don't know why. We call them cruisers. And you had to hide and everything and put a fly. It was difficult to do. And the fish were 16, 18, 20, 22, 24, 25, some even bigger. I remember, and I'm going to deviate a little that time, they would spook easily. And the fly had to be very subtle. we tied a fairly big fly out of polar bear hair.
Polar bear hair.
Polar bear hair, very translucent, and it's the only translucent hair that's tapered.
Right, and a polar bear probably didn't have to give his life for that one, like
I
the
don't
chicken
know.
did.
I didn't cut the hair. Anyway, one day we were looking for Flip and I think it was Flip, maybe it was, maybe it was Little John. We saw this fish. It was my turn to cast. So the idea was you got to the canal edge to cast, but you hid behind one of the palmetto palms, the palmetto palm, cabbage palm. And this time, I think it was Little John, sat back to back, hiding from the back, looking. And I moved a little bit, and evidently the fish saw it. But I don't know. And it's a silly thing, but I always remember he's tied against my back and going, ah. As if it was going to spook anybody. The snook already spooked, and he turned around with that guy, this thing, and he said, he knows. And the fish, you don't need to be that close if he's spooked already.
Yeah.
Well, one day I was in the Marco Canal, the canal that goes to Marco all the way to Marco Island. There are 3 of those canals. One goes to Everglades City, and so on. And saw a giant snook, fish over 30. Hid behind the palmetto, cast, fish came over, took, I set the hook. I could see it on the jaw, shaking his head. He took off, I took off behind him. Those days there weren't a lot of bushes and things around, but there were a lot of palms and there were some mangrove bushes. I got to a palm and a mangrove bush. I couldn't chase the fish if I went around the mangrove fish. And so what you did in those days, we took our pants off with the wallet and everything, and we jumped with the underpants and the shirt. It was a thing to do.
It was all the rage.
It was all the rage. And I chased him in the water and came down. Once that passed, I was able to get back and chase him. The fish kept running. I couldn't stop him. We run, and we run and walk after him. Couple of times he stopped and shook his head, but he was green. And at one point, the other side had oyster bars and had a mangrove, small mangrove tree, but it had big branches all the way. And he went on the branches on the other side of the canal, and he caught me off on the belly of the fly line. So I was there, boom, I made a backcast. That was it. Part of my fly line, the leader, the fly, and a great fish. And
Yeah.
I'll never forget her. Mammoth fish.
That's fantastic. Yeah, because you always think, man, what did they?
I remember
battle,
that
fight,
fish. And you know,
just want to bring this one in. You just want to bring this one
yeah,
in.
I still want to catch a 30-pound snook on fly, and I've never done it. And sometimes I wondered, had I caught one so early, if I would have the same passion for chasing those big snook.
Yeah.
Or not.
And that's a great point, because here you are, still searching.
Yeah.
Still adventuring. Still exploring to get that fish.
Yeah, to get that fish. Another fish that was a big deal to me, not as much now, was a big barracuda.
Mm-hmm.
And I caught a few. Once I caught 3, and then later a couple more over 30 pounds on fly. I loved it, but I don't desire to catch another one, try to catch a 40-pounder. It's sort of...
Been there, done that,
yeah,
accomplished that, move on. Yeah.
If I saw one now, certainly if Jeff was fishing with him, I'd step back and want him to catch one if you haven't caught one over 30 pounds.
Yeah.
Happily. No.
This is where I draw a
don't know
parallel.
that I would do the same for you with a 30-pound snook. So sorry, I just have to tell you that.
This is what
Noted.
this is where I draw a parallel too with fishing
But
and art.
so maybe it's good that I haven't caught that big snook.
Yeah, maybe
it's so right that he got away.
That's it. All the time. With like as an artist, being an artist, it's my job, but it's not just what I do, it's what I am, right? Being a fisherman, it's not just your job, it's not just what you do, it's what you am. There's a parallel between art and fishing that I draw there. And Jeff, I believe that you and I discussed this too. Like, I'm never going to stop painting. I'm never going to stop fishing either, but I'm never going to stop painting. When I go, there's going to be a half-finished painting somewhere that
I love it.
That was it. And it's the same thing. Like, there's going to be a fish that you got away that you didn't get.
Yeah.
But that search, that journey for the perfect fish, the journey for the perfect painting, it's there, and that's what keeps you going.
I've always been a romantic about everything. I have girlfriend, and I bring a rose when I'm not in trouble. In trouble, everybody brings 24 roses. That doesn't count. Just for the beauty, just for the pleasure of it. That's my feeling. And I think maybe that's where my thinking comes from. Maybe a little bit glad that she got away.
Hey, listen, maybe the magic is somewhere between a fish and a jazz song.
Yeah, indeed.
Right? Jeff, did you want to?
I want to build on that actual thought.
Yeah. Did you?
Audible.
Why don't you step in? Jeff has something that he wants to share with us.
Oh, absolutely.
Knowing Chico,
Put the headphone on. Put the headphone on.
this work?
You're there. Is it hooked? We're good.
So knowing Chico and echoing just what a romantic he is, and rehashing that Chico shared with us his great love for the Everglades, his love for red mangroves. When he and I were at the Rio Maria River in Brazil, fishing for giant peacock bass, before the trip, each day during the trip, Chico said to me, I really want to go for a hike in the rainforest.
Oh.
We're fishing hard every day, and I'm loving it. And to be sure, we had an epic week.
Oh, yeah.
There were 10 anglers. 8 of us caught fish over 20 pounds.
Yeah.
Wow.
We probably caught 2 or 3 dozen fish over 15 pounds during that week, our group. But Chico really wanted to go to the rainforest, and we wanted to make it happen, but based on conditions and the mothership moving each day, we were told, wait a day or two, we'll have the better opportunity. I think it was the last day of fishing, like the day before, or the
Yeah, I think it was the last day.
second to last day before we came back. We had the opportunity to go back into the rainforest, and we took a hike. Excuse me a second.
You're fine.
We took a hike that, for me, was magnificent. For Chico, I would say it was the fulfillment of one of his great, great dreams. To be in Brazil, to be in the rainforest, to observe dozens of plants and orchids and fauna that he had not really traversed on. And it was a special element to our whole trip. And we came back and we rehashed memories and we shared photos. And Chico wrote an article about the trip afterwards. And I wasn't surprised to see that several paragraphs of it echoed the beauty of the rainforest, the joy of hiking in it, and how much that one vignette, that 2-hour span
It was a highlight.
of the whole week adventure, and everything about it was magnificent, but yet it was that penetrating for Chico and for all of us. So, yeah.
So we started this by saying what we wanted to get from this episode, right? And we wanted people listening or watching this episode to have a better appreciation for what it means to, living a life that's connected by water, right? And I hope that people have heard what we've discussed today and have a better appreciation for the things that you just said, Jeff, to look around and appreciate life as we know it, life as it was, life what it can be. Not only just our lives, but the life and the nature around us, what it means to connect with a fish on a deeper level and not just out there hooking fish, ripping lips, as they say.
I think you cannot live for the moment of the strike alone. You can't do that. It's fun, it's great, but you got to enjoy the whole thing.
Yeah, I agree. Chico Fernandez, thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you so much for coming to the Harkavy's home, sharing with us your story, sharing with us your heart. It really has been truly special for me. And I think it's been special for everybody in this room to have you here and to be able to have this heartfelt discussion. And just to meet you, to know you.
Well,
Special for me. So thank you.
I've enjoyed it thoroughly, and I have felt very comfortable to speak, partly because I'm on my friend's home and he always make me feel at home. So I've enjoyed it.
Great. That's good to hear. That's awesome. So we're going to end this like we always do. Right? Your ego is not your amigo. Always do your best. At the end of the day, just let God do the rest. Do not ever forget that no matter where we are, no matter what we're doing, we're all connected by water. Thank you, Chico. Cheers.
Cheers. Need my glass.